Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. As Frank says, we're going to talk about the Navy in connection with the great concern about war, considering the time frame of late 1920, early 1921, and you think what the world had been through up through 1919 and the terrible Great War. The result was, I think, from all sides, there was a concern about this could never happen again. We've got to make it possible. Remember the desire for the League of Nations, which was a reality by this point, led to other concerns. And of course, the US of A wanted, if not to be in the League of Nations, according to the United States Senate, at least to help in other efforts to prevent war from coming about. And so that would, in fact, bring about, as Frank noted, this naval conference. By this point, President Wilson was no longer in office. He apparently would have enjoyed a third term and hoped that he would be recruited, but he was not. So he was retired with his first lady to a comfortable home there in DC. And his successor, the lackluster senator from Ohio, Warren G. Harding, was now president. But if we have very little good to say about President Harding, we can often say a lot of good, at least I can, about his Secretary of State. One of the most distinguished people that I'll talk about. He had been a Supreme Court justice after being governor of New York. He was a candidate for President of the United States in 1916. And a few counties in California led to Wilson's reelection, which a lot of people don't realize. He would go on after being Secretary of State to being Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So Harding was at least wise in choosing a great Secretary of State. So I'm assuming that it was Charles Evans Hughes who's responsible for this Washington Naval Conference. Of course, when you're number two, number one gets credit. So it is a matter of Harding. The meeting, which was held in a very grand space there in Washington, was in fact attended by 9 powers, including 2 Asian, China and Japan. And you see the others are all European. But it was meeting in the United States in a very famous facility there in Washington, in fact, built by the Daughters of the American Revolution. So it was quite a facility, and you can see the photograph, I think, is a bit odd because you can't appreciate until you really look at it how they could have gotten into that part. You see under the U.S. Naval Conference or above that, how they would have walked in that, and then people could have signed documents, and then look up in the top part, I guess, where the wives and other delegates or other interested parties could come and observe the proceedings. And then down there around the table, the various delegates sat. So, and of course, this was a very big deal for all concerned. Very significant, of course, for those who were involved. If you were part of the Weimar German or Communist Soviet Union, you do not go to your mailbox thinking, I think the postman lost my invitation, because nobody invited Germans and Soviets. They were the bad folks. So you can't come. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Why was Great Britain up there?
Oh, they were. Very much so. Well, I'm very sorry. Yes, they would definitely be there because they were, of course, the great British naval power. And the results, of course, would grant the United States and Great Britain naval parity, then Japan, and then France and Italy. I don't know how France felt about being put on the level with Italy, but deal with it. You have to accept these things in the reality. But yes, definitely the British were there, and there was no question about that. But it's very interesting in terms of the British involvement, because they were involved in what's known as the Anglo-Japanese alliance. And that relationship made Britain's dominions very concerned. The reason they were concerned, and again, you think this is why some people are in diplomacy and the rest of us are not, because people who were in diplomacy think about all of the what ifs. And among the what ifs, as far as Canadians were concerned, what if Japan went to war with the United States? How would that affect us? I mean, they'd just been helping Britain vociferously. So they were very, very concerned. They wanted to get Britain out of a unique relationship with Japan, and that's what will happen. And basically with these 4-power, 9-power treaties, which dealt with the tonnage of the navies and so forth, they had understandings, as in the 9-power treaty, we'll all work sort of for peace in the area, in Asia, of course, because the Japanese could care less about anywhere else. They were not interested in keeping the peace between Canada and the United States or Britain and France. It's all about Asia, right? So as far as the Japanese were concerned, that was what they were there for. I don't know if they really appreciated being dumped by the British, but I'm sure they tried to make it as nice as possible. And they said, it's not just us, it's all of us. We're into multi-concern and interest. Yeah, right. I'm not sure how well they bought it, but yeah. the British definitely were freed of their agreement, and now the various powers had a sort of joint idea of concern. And the Japanese, as far as their navy was concerned, was between the British and the Americans, but larger than the French and the Italians. So interesting how that can be, to think of where Japan is. And it seems like only yesterday when Commodore Perry was going to Tokyo, right? So, yeah, I mean, the Japanese worked fast and they really made it big time. So that was the Harding administration. And it was certainly a major event. And I thought it was terribly interesting when I discovered this. I mean, how often do treaties get popular songs? I know. I was just talking, some of you may remember Junior Walker and the All-Stars. Just thinking about, that was a popular group for anyone too young to know about these things. But I don't think this made the hit parade for 1921, but, or Billboard or any of the hip places. But I found this and I thought, I'm not going to sing it. Don't worry. Don't be scared. No. It's, if you've ever heard the music of the 20s and that song, it's just a popular way of singing of that day. But yes, there he is, Charles Evans Hughes and Warren G. Harding in the sheet music. And perhaps you can find it on eBay. I don't know. But somehow or other, this is the idea: sink all your ships. And but that, to me, is very illustrative of the pacifistic concerns. And don't forget, by now women can vote, and there's a lot of expressions of, yeah, all of that is just militarism, and spending money on all of that is dangerous. So they are praising Harding. I don't know if it affected his ratings. I mean, the man died in 1923, as some of you know, but while he was president, he must have gotten some acclaim for this. And certainly Secretary Hughes deserved a lot of it. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, somebody was getting a lot of love. Yes, we love Lenin. We love Lenin a lot. And apparently we still do, because he is available for viewing. Not that I would recommend going to Moscow right now. I really would not, okay? I'm going to discourage that, actually. I usually try to favor all tourist activities, but to come out and say I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy in the middle of Moscow might not be a good thing. So we'll assume you won't do it. But anyway, Lenin is there. I understand he gets fixed, and they work on the corpse and keep it all fresh and pretty new outfits, undoubtedly, like you did your dolly. You know, yeah, I mean, and yeah, they have to polish it because your skin gets a little, yeah. But enough of the grim activities in Moscow. Let's just think he's no longer with us. And after a fight between his two presumed favorites, Trotsky and Stalin, we can see who prevailed. Trotsky, of course, would pass away after an accident with an ice pick some years later in Mexico. Meanwhile, as far as Stalin is concerned, his doctrines would differ in many ways from those of Trotsky, because Trotsky was, like, say, a hardcore red, meaning that revolution is going on 24/7. And simply because we've succeeded in Russia, we've got to move it. You know, like the old song, Go West. Everything, we need more and more success with communism. Permanent revolution, it was called. Whereas Stalin said, we've already got it here, let's focus. And we'll develop it, and all of that, of course, will lead to the horrors of the 1930s. But as far as being concerned about diplomacy, the fact that Stalin would prevail would mean that there would be developed and strong an organization known as the Comintern, short for Communist International, an organization where you have communist parties literally all over the world. I mean, there were chapters in the United States or Canada or Argentina or whatnot. And they are all sort of led by someone in Moscow. I mean, you know, you hear that in groups and say we have our national headquarters or international headquarters. And so if you really want to be a delegate and you get to go to Moscow, think what a thrill that would be. I mean, you'd have your camera, your Polaroid, and take pictures of you maybe hanging out with Stalin or some of the others, and go home and everybody be jealous. So the Comintern was supposed to help agitate the communists everywhere. But the Soviet Union has to get respectable. Why? Because if you're going to be a diplomat, you can't be an outlaw. I mean, I know it's very upsetting because the Comintern sort of separates itself from the Soviet government. And I want to mention here this poor soul, because he doesn't get a lot of press, but I want to honor him, Chicherin. He's the foreign minister. If you were to go to a Russian history party, and everybody would know the head of the Comintern or all kinds of people around Stalin, but if you bring him up, people will look somewhat indifferent. Chicherin doesn't get a lot of publicity, but you'll get it here. He was really the first foreign minister. Some of you may have noticed that his photo, I brought up his photograph because he was at that meeting when they met with the Germans. Remember, they met with the Germans and they were saying, like, how y'all doing? Yeah, we're communists, but we're really interested in economic relationship, and we hope there are no bad feelings because of the Communist Party in Germany. That's their business, but we're here. We're all about money making. Well, of course, we know people say things that aren't true. And it's definitely true that I'm sure the right hand knew what the left was doing. But the Comintern kept its distance from the policies of the Soviet government, while this individual ran this in Stalin's era. Early in Stalin's era, remember, Stalin will keep breathing until 1953. But not so Chicherin. Chicherin, who was actually, and I'm sure this is something he wouldn't talk about a lot, was the son of an aristocrat. I mean, that's not something you would like to brag about. Yeah, my family were part of the exporter class. We had fun. We went to a lot of balls, and it's just something you don't talk about if you have a desire to be part of a communist leadership team, right? Yeah, I know about being nobility, but yeah, not good, not good. So Chicherin came by this, honestly. His father had been of that group. He had gotten involved. Some of you will remember the Mensheviks, who were opponents of Lenin's group, the Bolsheviks. And apparently Chicherin knew when it was time to have a conversion. Sometimes you look around and say, oh, are we losing here? Hey, Bolsheviks, want to come on your side because you're looking better every day. So he became a follower of Lenin at the right time. And, late in 1917, they all went back. They had been in London. So he ended up going back and he got this nice position. As you see, he's not a particularly charismatic fellow, but he knew how to conduct the business of diplomacy, which means that, of course, he knew how to say worldwide revolution forever, and all that. But then start talking about, but we want to work with you, because it seems a little hypocritical, doesn't it? Because obviously you want to have a relationship with us, but then you want to hurt us. And so, but people do lie sometimes. And so that's part of diplomacy, they said. And so in this case, I feel strongly that Chicherin and people of that sort were involved in more than a little hypocrisy. But during his era, the Soviets maintained themselves as a government that began to get some acceptance. I don't mean everybody wanted to recognize them, and it's not like you're going to get invited to the best parties. No, but it sort of starts. The British will come around and, okay, you can have an ambassador, that kind of thing. But it's slow. Man, they don't get to Washington until 1933. So, yeah, if you want diplomatic recognition, you're going to have to behave yourself. And if they catch them, with that Comintern people, so you have to be real careful about your spies and, all of that, because you don't want to get caught. And Chicherin, who had a variety of illnesses, would retire. And I think, the old Southern expression, retire while the getting was good, because he retired and died before Stalin's purges, which would have helped his passing away. If he lived that long, I mean, it's like, Peacha, you can't purge me because I'm dead first. Yeah. I mean, it's like, last laugh. I don't know. But anyway, no more Chicherin. That's, as a matter of fact, the first head of the Comintern, whose name was Zinoviev, he was one of those purged. And you think, Stalin just had this thing about doing away with people. He just didn't want anybody who had known Lenin to be around anymore. So all of these people died. So yeah, he just beat him to it. That is Chicherin. Now, this particular individual has the distinction of being the first president of the Weimar Republic. So he has, I should think, a very important role in German history. He was not a conservative at all. He was what they called a social democrat, which I consider to be moderate left wing, perhaps. Not a socialist, not a communist, but wanting various social reforms and programs. Ebert. Interestingly, I found out today his son was mayor of East Berlin. Isn't that wild? He was a big red, yeah. But that's Frederick Jr. Yeah, but not Dad. Dad was social democrat, and as president, which in the Weimar way is more or less the executive, since they no longer have a monarch. And the president then appoints the various ministers led by a chancellor to run the government. But that's as good a symbol as any about the kind of person who would gain this position of great pressure, I would call it, great interest on the part of others. He didn't live a long time because he died when he was in his 50s, and probably because of the pressure of his work. You know, how do you please people, not only in your own country, but remember, this is Weimar Germany, and nobody likes us, except maybe the Russians, and we don't like them mostly. So, I mean, it's a very, very tough position to be in. So he's got enemies, German enemies on the right side, and then he has the French, who, of course, anything about Germany is going to be bad news. So anyway, he had a very hard time. And this, of course, is a very, very famous incident. The name of Kapp is very important in the history of the right wing in Germany at this time, because already in this Kapp push, or this attempted overthrow, they're already trying to destroy the Weimar Republic. Now, you talk about a government that had little or no prayers. I think they did right well to last till 1933. When you stop and think about all that opposed it. And this Kapp push, 1920. So that's pretty early on when you think about it, and you think what they were trying to do. And that, of course, this, of course, is before, I mean, Hitler was nothing of great significance at this point. But this movement has that kind of element written all over it, as far as the right wing is concerned, in opposition to social democrats, not to mention communists, because there was a very large and healthy German communist movement, believe you me. There's no question about that. But as far as being strong, yes, the government's forces did put down the Kapp group, the push, but it did not speak well to the future of this Weimar regime. For some reason, this familiar man would be known even in his own day as the old gentleman. And of course, it was in no way, or what do they say now, ageism or any of that. It was always Hindenburg's designation as being, you know, the most venerable person in all Germany, that kind of thing. And he will become the next president, Ebert having died. Von Hindenburg, well, the von gives it away, doesn't it? He definitely upper class and famous to all Germans from the Great War. And like military leaders do sometimes, Dwight D. Eisenhower being an example, then stand for office as civilians. This particular photograph shows him in uniform, but now he is going to be a civilian and he will be chosen as president. And he will be president until his death in 1934. Even though he's almost defeated by Hitler in another election. He's an interesting man. You know, I don't know, and I'll always be interested, and I guess we'll never know. Did he really want to restore the Hohenzollerns to the throne? Did he want to recreate the throne? He would definitely no Republican, but he did hold the office of president and symbolizing what was considered the unfair nature of the peace and the fact that really the Germans would have won if they had not been stabbed in the back by civilians back at home. And they were mistreated because of reparations. He will be a major figure. Now, that said, there were people around him who had a lot of, shall we say, influence, including his own son. But all of this is to say that von Hindenburg, and you can see his birth and death date, so you can see he did live a long time, and he did maintain a great deal of prestige. But there was no question about his stepping down until he died. And then there's Italy. Oh boy. If those people could have kicked themselves in their collective Italian pants, and they would have said, why did we get in this stupid war? They were so unhappy. Orlando's government fell. The structure of these European governments, even now, they come and they go quite often. So like we change clothes. I mean, it's like you're thinking, really? Yeah. I mean, it's like you lose your support and then suddenly you're out. And you may get back, but maybe you won't, and you may not even be in the same position. It's very hard for us to keep up with as Americans simply because our system is so different. But in any event, they were, as you recall, one of the winners in the Great War, but they didn't feel like it. They wanted more. They said, we came in and we could have stayed out, but we came in because you needed us. Really? Yeah. Didn't do so well though, did we? C minus at best. And so, yeah, the Italians, they got a lot of golf and not a lot of credit for their contributions to the Allied victory. I mean, there were a lot of hurt feelings down Roma way, but that is to say that the problems of Italy, which were significant already, were merely exacerbated by their participation in the Great War. And as you know, Mussolini comes along even in the early 1920s, long before we think of Hitler. And that again has to do with the incredible instability of Italy. And Mussolini is a strange one in many ways when you recall that he was named for Benito Juarez, get this wrong. Juarez, yeah. The great Mexican revolutionary. And it's like, why? Well, I mean, he came from a revolutionary family and they thought, oh, Benito, oh, you'll be so cool. You know, you're pink, you're red, you're hot. You know, it's, all of this is to say that even though coming from this sort of left-wing background, in fact, he was anti-war, pacifist. Workers of the world unite. Marx's greatest hits. I mean, it's all of that. And then suddenly another chance. And of course, this will be fascism. Whether or not we want to give him credit as the father of fascism, I'm not so sure. Mussolini would be willing to do whatever he needed to do in terms of a belief or philosophy to have power. And the whole definition of fascism, well, this isn't a graduate seminar in fascism, but there's been that word often bothers me because I don't think sometimes we completely understand what it means. But at that time, it was supposed to be anti-communism, nationalism, go big I, we're Italy, we're big, we're bad, and that sort of thing. And I love the picture from 1922. And of course, this is the famous March to Rome and how all of the can you see him there? Because he's in a suit and all the black shirts. And they're not just young. Some of them got some age on them. But they're in their outfits, their uniforms. And, you know, it's like, I love you, Duce, you know, that kind of thing. So they're all with him. And I think he is basically on the way saying, like, we want to fight communism and Italy should get its fair shake and all of the things that many of the elements in Italy want to hear. It's like, and you could jump around, like be a physical education leader, I guess, because he was quite, you know, good at jumping through hoops of fire and, you know, lifting, you know, and all of that. The Steve Reeves of the 30s Italy. The idea being, of course, that many admired him, including Winston Churchill. Yes. I don't think that's something later on Churchill would have wanted to talk about, but You ever heard that old expression? It seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah. Apparently, probably he'd had a little more brandy than he needed. And the future Sir Winston said, well, you know, the Italians need someone like that. And I mean, that's hurtful, but it's like we need somebody who'll get us organized and get us set up. And so that's what they thought of him. At least many people. Because remember, Mussolini starts out rather quietly becoming prime minister, and he does not attempt to overthrow their king. The king is maintained, much to Mussolini's later regret, I can assure you. But it seemed like a good idea at the time. We'll keep the king, and I'll be the prime minister. And I'll just help the king, and the king will help me. And you can imagine how long that lasted. But you know what they say? Things change, and they did. And Mussolini will end other political parties and make a series of mistakes that we will consider as the course goes on. But we've got him there. And of course, remember, he's in there before these kinds of dictators are the cool thing. He's the first. And a lot has to do, I think, with the instability of Italy. But it's interesting, Italy had been one of the allies. Remember, they weren't the defeated power, but they might as well have been, considering their conditions. Very, very unstable situation for the Italians. I put up, of course, the Il Duce because we understand it would be wonderful, I guess, he would have thought, if they call me Your Majesty, and then they knelt and kissed my ring. But, you know, it's nice to have people kneel and kiss your ring. But if we can't have that, at least they can call me boss, because that has a nice ring to it. Maybe not like Your Majesty, but yeah. But in terms of boss, it seemed to work for Mussolini, at least until 1943. Yeah, too bad in the middle of the war to have to lose out, but that's the way it goes. But there he is in his suit. He's all gussied up, and Signora Mussolini had him fixed nice, all fixed up, gone to the barber and everything. I'm back to my Wilson Palace in Geneva. I can't stay away too long because after all the sad news that I've issued, I think this is our hope here in the League of Nations. And who's holding it together? Mostly the British and the French, I'll tell you. But remember, no Americans, no Soviets, no Germans. So we've got the British, and we have the French. Oh, the Italians. Yeah, that's a big help. It's like, but they pay the dues, I guess. But so there are a variety of members, but among the big powers, it's interesting to note that the British, French, and the Japanese are there. Yeah, we don't forget them, except they don't go to many meetings that aren't about Asia. I mean, it's like, oh, y'all are going to talk about some European issue. Oh, I've got to see a man about a dog this afternoon, but got to do my hair, whatever excuses people use to get out of things. Just not interested. So, but boy, the French are there every meeting. And so are those Czechoslovaks too. Yeah. that Czech foreign minister is there, Benesh. Oh, he could not miss it. He had a round trip ticket between Prague and Geneva. Oh, and I mean back and forth and back and forth. He loved Geneva. And you know why? He didn't want to miss anything that dealt, of course, with those nations like Czechoslovakia that were new. So this will be the headquarters, and that will be significant. You can still see it today. It's part of the UN, along with the grand headquarters, which will be opened in 1936. It's interesting, or at least when I came across this reference, that actually the Americans would attend certain sessions. And you say, why? Well, it's sort of like we don't make any commitments, but we want to hear what y'all are up to. And maybe we could share with y'all, but we don't want to be a part of it, but we're really interested. And so it's kind of interesting. It's like no commitments, but we like to be in Geneva too. Well, who wouldn't? I mean, it's really nice, but that is the idea. It's not as if the Americans were not going to be around, but they refused to be a member. So they have a significance of sort, but when you're not willing to make a commitment and tell that to the French, there are going to be some hurt feelings. Yeah, sadness, because of course we all understand. That's why the French is so big. Oh, I don't know anybody except maybe the Czechs who were bigger League of Nations people. Give me a big L, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, take me to Prague, take me to Paris. From Geneva, it's like we want it, Marge.
I'm sorry, I probably having a senior moment.
No.
Why is it that Harding didn't want to be in the League of Nations?
Well, by that point now, remember the United States Senate had already rejected that American involvement in the League. And that's why the treaty didn't make it. We had to get a whole separate treaty, which was actually signed by the United States and Germany in 1921 after Wilson left office. So I'm not so sure. Harding was told, I think, by his advisors on the campaign trail to sort of not take a strong position one way or the other, sort of, you know, the way sometimes politicians will do. You can't pin them down. But
I think that was the class I missed. That's what you get when you play hockey.
Yeah, I don't even want to go there. Yes, and the hurt, the shame. Yeah, yes. No. Can't happen. But you get the idea that basically, and of course, the political thing is always there. The fact that Harding had, in fact, as the opponent of the Democratic Party, and Wilson had been so partisan in his approach that it just was not going to work out for membership. But it was a tragedy, no doubt about that. Now we come to what's called the Geneva Protocol of 1924. And by the term Geneva, you get where it's done. And a protocol is the sort of agreement that people abide by And this particular Geneva Protocol was because of the Ramsay MacDonald government. Now, if you were here when we talked about the Ramsay MacDonald government, that was Britain's first Labour government. And everybody thought, ooh, how radical, how exciting. It lasted a little less than a year. But Ramsay MacDonald, remember, he was a Scot, some of you will remember. And I don't know whether it's from his Highlands experience or what, but he had some pretty radical ideas in terms of maintaining peace. So with French support, and you know, the French are going like, if there's anything about keeping the peace. The Geneva Protocol of 1924 basically said, if you get caught being aggressive, your country, we're going to come down on you hard. So basically it says that you will be brought to the International Court in The Hague, which had been set up even before the League of Nations. You'll be brought up, and what if you say, well, we won't go? You know what we'll do to you? You'll be internationally sanctioned, loser. You'll have a new t-shirt. Everybody hates me. I mean, that is the idea, though. The Geneva Protocol is supposed to cut aggressors off. So you better watch yourself. You better behave. So that was the idea. The French are like, yes, yeah, this is great. Anybody who loves sauerkraut gets some ideas. Then we'll have the rest of the nations coming down and invoking that Geneva Protocol. Alas, the conservatives of Britain are going like, that isn't such a good idea. And the Labour folks, I tell you, those British governments could come and go just like the French. And in this case, the government that succeeded the Labour government by the end of 1924, actually, poor Ramsay MacDonald, they had said, we were just kidding. We don't really mean it, because that was them, the Pinks, those Labour people. So we cancel it. Now, I don't know if you like my cartoon, but I thought it was cute. It was basically showing, as you can see, the French. You see that pitiful imitation of a French, you know, Z's, like, monsieur, you know, and all of, yeah, exactly, oui, and all that. And you see the up in the corner, those, yeah, sort of sinister Germans back there. And then who is all so fancy? Some of you may recognize him. He is Austen Chamberlain, a very famous British statesman and older brother of, yes, Neville, the famous one. Well, the idea is the little wusses, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, and Australia, are hiding behind Great Britain. And you say, why? Because they don't want to have anything to do with troubles in Europe. I believe I pointed out to you that all the parts of the British Empire that were now more or less self-ruled, they were dominions, to be sure. But it's still true to say that they didn't want to have any responsibility for Britain's world role. They, you know, had their own issues. This is the beginning of this sort of, we're different. I mean, we're part of the British world, but not to that extent. So that's why they are depicted as sort of timid children behind Great Britain. All of that, of course, leaves the poor French very, very disappointed. Because remember, the French are just thinking over and over again, oh, what was the old song? Who will I turn to? I mean, it's like you're always thinking like, but the Germans, they keep reproducing and there are more of them and they've got all this and look at us and we just have all these problems. So their dreams of 1924 were strong, but of course, very brief, because the new British government said, sorry, just can't keep it up. However, and I do say it, I mean, it was a big deal when in 1925, right after that, and because in 1924, there had been a decision to have this, the Geneva Conference, and you see the delegates. And by the way, the second one, Briand was his name, a famous Frenchman who will be talked about a lot in subsequent talks. These type individuals would be meeting, and as you see, they began to deal with issues of chemical and biological warfare because, of course, the effects of the gas had become only too clear in the years after the Great War. So we're not surprised that this was under discussion. So by 1925, they had agreement that certain elements were to be banned by 1928. Well, didn't work out, but it's not that these people weren't trying, or at least paying lip service to the idea of ending these kinds of practices. If we think in the 1920s, there was a kind of feeling, you know, we'll get it better, we'll do it better, I think that would be true. It's just very sad that whatever agreements are being made doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to carry them out. But it's like this one with yet another conference. If you had had a hotel in Geneva, you would have had no problem having full occupancy, because clearly there were lots and lots of conferences. And remember, this is in addition to just being the delegates there at league meetings. In fact, what we have here is a failed naval disarmament conference. If we had a successful one in Washington, well, let's have another one. And we can even perhaps reduce further the size of these navies. Well, as you notice, only Japan and Great Britain accept the invitation. And so nothing happens. The cartoon illustrates a point that needs to be made. And those of you may have learned this in American history somewhere along the lines will be aware that in the 20s and 30s, as a result, I guess, of isolationism and others factors, the argument was that military manufacturers support wars because of their business interests. And so that was the idea here, that when you see, and this is disarmament, the young lady who's on the tiger of militarism and then she gets eaten up. No pacifism, because of course the tiger is too strong. Now this comes out of a Des Moines paper in 1926, which is rather interesting, I think. I mean, it's not the New York Times, it isn't the Washington Post, but it has the idea that wars come about because, as the cartoonist calls it, militarism, and others then would speak of, well, why do we have militarism? And of course, the almighty dollar, because of course of what President Eisenhower, some of you will remember the military industrial complex, remember all that? And even back then, people were talking about that. How can we have peace when so many business interests want us to have wars? Whether or not that's true, it is interesting to me that people were already utilizing this as a kind of explanation of why these disarmament conferences were failing and people were not being supportive of these significant causes, or so they thought. This I wanted you to see because I wanted you to see the fashions. Yes, I think it's very interesting to see that you have one person, one lady, who's there doing the traditional Japanese. But then you have the other folks hiking up those skirts, showing some leg. And you were thinking, pretty wild stuff, yeah. Right there in London. And of course, we had our group shot and we having a big time in London. But unfortunately, it was not a successful trip. The reason it was not successful is because the Japanese could not get what they wanted, which was, well, in many ways, what they had been seeking for a long time, and that is a recognition of their equality. In this specific case, they wanted naval parity. But they were rejected, and then that ended that. Oh, there will be further talks, but this, in the sense of that period, kind of ends on a sad note. But more importantly are the outfits. And I think it's very interesting. And apparently they didn't have to conform. If you wanted to go Western, you could, or you could wear something more traditional. And of course, all these men have those big old hats on. And so this definitely is Japan goes west, because all of it is very, very Western indeed. And of course, they would maintain themselves as a major power. Now, this is as late as 1930, And believe me, things are going to get much more serious as time moves on. So, as far as this is concerned, we understand disarmament, concern for wars, all of that is very, very real. But at the same time, we're aware, of course, that nothing seems to work out for them in terms of success. Is it because they were dreading the possibility of another war? I don't think so. I think it was more they just couldn't come to any kind of agreement that everyone could accept, and therefore they all failed. But that doesn't mean that everything is going to be a failure, because it definitely didn't. Because really, up to this point, we've just gotten into the early 20s, really. And it does seem sort of glum. Why haven't we succeeded? Well, now we're going to. Because the big problem, of course, has to do with, as usual, money. And of course, the money is from the Germans. We all understand that the German financial issue was paramount in the Versailles Treaty, and the Germans feel aggrieved, and particularly the French and the Belgians feel betrayed, and they want money for their damages, reparations. All of this, in other words, will cause or help to cause many of the problems that we know from the early 1920s. The Ruhr crisis, if you recall that, when the Belgians and French go in to take over the industrial areas. All of this helps lead to the German massive inflation that we talked about last time. And of course, you know who they're going to call on from across the Atlantic. You said United States, you're right, they did. And the United States, no, and work out between yourselves, but we want our money. And this will really raise some tempers, because many people will say, well, we don't really think it's fair that we should have to pay. Now, of course, we see some of that nowadays when debts are forgiven, and you're thinking, well, why should they be forgiven? I mean, you borrowed the money, so you pay it back. And this is that particular issue on the part of the British and the French, particularly to the Americans, because they're going like, you Americans, you didn't lose all that many people. Look at what we've lost. And sure, you were generous. We appreciate it. But can't you just accept our mercy and we don't have to pay you any money? And the Americans are going to say, no, we want the money. So let's get busy with that. So you can see it from both points of view, I suppose. And if the Americans had said, you know, you're right, forget it, we just love you, we'll never get over that nice Eiffel Tower you gave us, we really appreciate that. No, I mean, it's like, we want it, and we'll put you on the, what they used to call it, the happy installment plan or something like that. It's like, yes, thank you. Yes, you would know about that. Yes, yeah, that's awful. But yeah, they would pay until what, the 40s or the 50s. It would go on and on and on. You get that little check, I guess would be in the mail. Sent over by plane, airmail. In any event, there was no one who would intervene. And I think it was Calvin Coolidge who said in a press conference, well, they hired the money, didn't they? In other words, it's not like this is a freebie. You borrowed it, and so you should pay it back. That's just the way it is. And so you need to get over this idea that it's just going to all disappear. Those are debts. We still like you, but we need our money. So here comes the Dawes Plan, Charles Dawes. Some of you will remember a song that was popular when many of us were very young. It was called All in the Game. Many a tear had to fall, but it's all in the game. I could sing it, but I won't. No, I could get a copy of that. It was very popular, and believe it or not, Charles Dawes wrote it. I know. This is something to tell at parties. You say, do you know what else Charles Dawes did besides being Calvin Coolidge's vice president? They will be very impressed with your Ollie gained knowledge, because be the hot stuff of the party crowd. Yes, he wrote that, and it was a very popular song. 60s, early 60s, late 50s, I guess. In any event, the idea was that Charles Dawes, who became quite a successful economist, businessman, multimillionaire, had a beautiful home in Evanston near the campus of Northwestern. If you've been out in that area, beautiful area. His home is used now for parties and receptions, not unlike we have here, for a fee. No freebies. And all of this is to say that Dawes received the honor of being nominated as vice president. I think he did because Coolidge, remember Coolidge had inherited the presidency after Warren Harding died. And I think he thought Dawes would be useful as his vice president. Well, in the event, Dawes was not a great asset. And you remember that Coolidge actually decided to retire as vice president. I do not choose to run. But Dawes wanted to stay on as vice president, but he didn't get a recommendation from Coolidge. And so Herbert Hoover turned him down. So that was the end of that. But Dawes, you say, why would he lose the position with Coolidge? Well, I'll tell you, he overslept. There was a big Senate vote. You know how it is, 50-50. And he was taking a nap. And he didn't make the meeting. Yeah, that hurts. You have to be careful when you take your naps. Remember that. If you got something important to do, I would really watch that clock. But yeah, so that was the end of that relationship. Sometimes you think presidents and vice presidents just love each other. Not always. Not in that case. But none of that really matters. What we are concerned with is the Dawes plan in terms of solving international financial issues, because that's where he will get his fame. And a Nobel Peace Prize in the offing, which is very, very nice. And this is the way it would work. I found this and I thought this was quite informative, because you can see France, well, that could include Belgium, and the United States with all of its assets. And we were rich back then, I promise. It's hard to believe, isn't it? But yeah, we used to be rich. We quite rich. So you have us up there, and all of Wall Street and all kinds of financial interests are going, in fact, to pour millions and millions. Remember when million meant something? You remember when somebody would say, I'm a millionaire, and we go, ooh, those days are gone. But that was nice. In any event, millions and millions of dollars into German development, then Germany would then turn around and use that profits for reparations, after which they could turn around and pay those war debts, because we're waiting. So that is the way that was supposed to work, and that's why these arrows make it kind of helpful. And you can just imagine all of the complexities that would have been entailed in there. And I know you're wondering, what about Soviet war debts? Well, you can forget that. If you're waiting for a parcel post from Moscow, it's not coming. Those people repudiated all those debts because they said not paying because it has nothing to do with us. We represent the people. And you lowlifes who are involved in the war, you're not a comrade to us. And so that was all just gone. So don't even, they would bring it up occasionally during a negotiation. Like, you remember when Russia borrowed all that money? Would you like to? No, we wouldn't really want to talk about that. We just want to talk about something else that's a little more pleasant. Love your borscht, though. It's very tasty. But no, we're not talking about that's gone. You're never going to get any of that. And that was very hurtful. You know how it is when people don't pay the money, pay the debts. So that's why we didn't reestablish relationship until 1933. Anyway, with the Dawes plan, that's the way it was supposed to work, and it would be improved and enhanced. And there he is, the Nobel Prize winner. And you see, he lived quite a long time, until 1951. And after he retired, lived on his estate, I guess you would say, there in Evanston, Illinois. And as you know, a Nobel Peace Prize is a very, very great honor. But this was, I think, in many ways, the idea of solving at long last the issue of war debts and reparations. We will provide the money. We, meaning American investments, will provide the money so that the Germans can get themselves fixed up. Then they can begin to pay off their debts, reparations to France and Belgium. And then we can start getting our checks in the mail. That's the way it was supposed to be. Now, as I say, someone who in fact was the president of RCA, if you remember the RCA Corporation, by the name of Young, would draw up a revised plan that fit this very scheme. But I just go on and talk about Dawes because he did win the Nobel Prize and because this seems such a landmark event in the mid-1920s and provided people with such a sense of relief. And on that happy note, I think I'll end for today. Thank you all for your attention. And I hope I've covered everything and given the British their fair share of credit. Okay, thank you.